Consider this video to be kind of a pre-review. They should probably come up with a word for that. Assuming I don't suck at time management and get this video finished, Fire Emblem Engage should be releasing in just a few days, and I'm ready to play some sweet anime chess. But before I do, I feel like I should look back on what made the previous Fire Emblem title, Three Houses, so good. So here's that. That's this video. Here's a transition. The original Game Boy Advance Fire Emblem was etched into my childhood for a pretty simple reason. I didn't have it. My sister did. She let me try it out and I was hooked, but I was constantly having to beg, borrow, and occasionally steal the cartridge in order to play it. My parents didn't really do allowances, so in terms of getting my own, I was pretty much SOL. But it was this unique situation that led to me really appreciating the times when I got to play it freely, and it formed a lifelong attachment to the series. Its unique blend of interesting strategy maps, long-term RPG development, and permadeath created something wholly unique to me. The series has gone through some trials and tribulations, especially in the West. But in the long timeline of titles that go all the way back to 1990, we're going to start here, with Fire Emblem Awakening. It was sort of a last gasp for the series, as there were reports that it would be shut down without hitting certain sales thresholds. The development team at Intelligent Systems basically threw the kitchen sink at the game, and it resulted in an incredibly uneven experience that people still pretty much loved. It sold well over what it needed to, and the Fire Emblem series moved from a niche title to a well-known one within Nintendo's collection of first-party titles. As I said earlier, I'm kind of a Fire Emblem nut, so I recognize that outside of the fandom there's probably not as much knowledge about this, but Awakening and its successor, Fire Emblem Fates, caused a lot of worry in the community. Namely, the game's tone and mechanics seemed to be moving in the opposite direction of what the series had been known for. There was a lot of emphasis on things like romance and accessibility, which led people to be worried that the series would lose part of its identity as a more serious strategy experience. Chief among these complaints was the writing, which was never a series' strength, but which had moved from inoffensive to actively detrimental. The characters were all surface level, with each one of them having basically one personality trait that would just be repeated ad nauseum, while the main stories can best be described as a bunch of idiots acting like idiots. It's a difficult problem to explain, because Awakening and Fates undoubtedly saved the series from its purgatory of low sales and questionable localization status. Especially considering the title released prior to Awakening, a remake of Fire Emblem 3, never actually made it to the States. I remember this period in the fandom being this weird balance of loving that people had finally realized how great the series was while lamenting that it might not return to the types of games that created the fandom in the first place. And honestly, it still hasn't. Many of the problems in Awakening and Fates persisted into the next two releases, but instead Fire Emblem found a new strength, and it's what made Three Houses so great. 15 games in, Fire Emblem finally decided to have good writing. It actually happened before Three Houses, with Fire Emblem Echoes, a remake of the second Fire Emblem title. It's worth noting that this was originally an NES title, so while they kept much of the gameplay intact, they added a lot to the story and characters that wasn't there before. I don't want to oversell the game since it wasn't groundbreaking or anything, but the characters were a lot more charming and the story overall was just more complete and well-rounded than anything that had come before. It had a feel of an old PS2 RPG in a good way, and it was helped along by the fact that it was the first time in series history that characters were fully voice acted. But Three Houses is where the series took a pretty huge risk in completely changing its format in order to complement its writing. Gone was the series of battles that all other Fire Emblem games had consisted of, and in its place was a sort of hub world where you could interact with characters who would have new dialogue as new events happened. Gone was the linear increases in power for characters, and in its place was a system more focused on the RPG aspect than the strategy aspect, allowing players to customize each unit in a number of different ways. These customizations were very much not immediate, with gradual increases that the player had to actively participate in, and it's here where the game's mechanics and story intertwined. Three Houses was about its characters. The first thing you really do in the game is learn about each of the three groups and its members, and what this means is from the word go, you're already sort of building attachment to them by choosing one of them over the other two. Throughout the game, this gets reinforced and reinforced again. There's a lot of upkeep to do in Three Houses, and I know it's a big sore spot for a lot of players, especially on repeat playthroughs. For each character you need to worry about getting support points, increasing morale for training, choosing which skills to train, choosing whether you want to actively train them in the limited time you have, talking to them to see their unique dialogue, activating the support conversations, and occasionally doing side quests for them. You even have to do this for characters you don't have if you want to recruit them to your house at some point later on. For this reason, the Academy phase has become a major annoyance even for fans of the game, but it's worth thinking about what this does on a first playthrough. It's meant to build attachment to your units in a way that Fire Emblem has never really done before, and it mixes in well with the permadeath aspect of the series. Then there's the writing aspect of it. The writing in Three Houses is so ridiculously better than any other Fire Emblem title that it's almost incomparable. Support conversations, a series staple which had become almost vessels for comedy rather than character development in Fates and Awakening, have returned as a writing strength. Since the game has control over what units are sort of paired with others by virtue of them being separated in houses, it can really focus the writing and character relationships in ways the series couldn't before. Rather than spreading them out and having each character be responsible for interactions with 20 or 30 other characters, supports were now focused between the 8 students of each house. Almost as important is, considering the format, the game could reasonably expect you to see all of the supports between the 8 characters as well, considering you'd be deploying them together for at least the first portion of the game. Here's an example. Take Ingrid of the Blue Lions. Her support conversations cover a huge range of topics. With Sylvain, it's about their playfully antagonistic childhood friendship. With Ash, they bond over their shared love of knighthood. With Felix, the conversations are about her deceased fiancé. With Dedue, it's about his people's part in the death of said fiancé. And with Mercedes, they talk about their fathers trying to arrange marriages for them. This results in Ingrid becoming this multifaceted character whose past and desires have shaped her and who continues to change as she has new experiences at the monastery. Compare this to Awakening or Fates, where a character's support conversations would boil down to "I'm clumsy" or "I like pickles, no seriously," and it's easy to see the leap. And that's not to say that Three Houses is perfect from a story standpoint, because the main story itself struggles a lot. It has problems in all 4 routes and for different reasons, but in general the payoff of the slow-paced Academy phase can be a bit of a letdown in the second part of the game. I think the aim was to build up the characters in the first half and then put them through the trials of war and fighting their former classmates in the second half, but it's inconsistent in the execution of this. Sometimes you'll get these powerful moments on the battlefield, and sometimes you just get a pre-battle narration about stuff that happened off-screen. Three Houses had a myriad of other problems too, like the overly simplistic map design, removal of the weapon triangle, and general lack of difficulty. It's by no means a perfect game, or even a definitively better game than Fates or Awakening, but I think it deserves a ton of credit for turning what has long been a series' weakness into a major strength. And this, unfortunately, is where my worries come in with Engage. While Three Houses pushed away from the recent history of Fire Emblem, Engage is focusing on the series' past. Its involvement of previous series lords as supporting characters seems like it calls back to Fire Emblem Awakening in terms of tone and focus. Rather than letting new characters establish and develop themselves, I'm genuinely very worried that they'll instead use it as an excuse to keep most characters simplistic. Let's be frank here, the history of Fire Emblem is not exactly stuffed with interesting main characters. Most of them are just variations on the same bland Mary Sue type hero with different hair colors. There are certainly exceptions, which is why Ike is the fucking man, but I question whether including them will have a positive impact on the story. And to be fair here, there's interesting things that could be done. Take for example Sigurd, having him be a parallel or a mentor to a character in Engage could lead to some interesting moments considering how his story unfolds in Fire Emblem 4. But I don't know if what I've seen so far of the title gives me any confidence in them going in that direction. I suppose my point here is that Fire Emblem Engage's story quality is not going to be determined by its inclusion of past lords, but how its new characters and main story stand on their own. In this sense, my greatest worry is that these older characters take screen time and character development away from the new ones. And to be fair, once again, there's some things I see that are keeping me optimistic. Early reports are that the game plays out more traditionally structure-wise and focuses on the battles themselves. And combining the minor exploration elements of Three Houses with a Fire Emblem style war campaign is a really good idea. The Warrior style spin-off for Three Houses did this as well, and it was the best part of that game. It's leagues ahead of the basic world map narration that handheld Fire Emblem titles used. It's also worth mentioning that despite any negativity I might feel towards the direction of Engage, I'm still buying this sucker day one. As I've stated many times in this video, Fire Emblem is my fucking jam, but sometimes you can be overcritical of the things you love. Here's hoping my next video is explaining how much I loved Engage. Thanks for watching. My next video will probably be an analysis of Engage, so look forward to that. Subscribe, like, comment, all that stuff if you enjoyed the video and want to see more.